The technology that changed music probably forever on today's Deeper History. Today's Deeper History subject, the 45 RPM. Now, let's back up just a little bit. 1877, Thomas Edison invents the wax phonograph cylinder. 1890s, Emily Berliner, I believe it is, invents the gramophone. There is some contest to that because apparently Thomas Edison had something very similar, very close.
And he had a patent.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, but apparently history has given it to Emily.
Yeah.
So, and then Berliner forms Victor Talking Company machine in 1901, which becomes
RCA Victor.
RCA. And then 1919, the disc patents expire, and everybody, of course, starts to do vinyl discs. 1931, RCA Victor introduced the vinyl disc itself.
The 72. Yeah.
Correct. And then 1948, the 33 comes out, which is basically a very large...
And very unheralded, I might add. It's almost like you had to be one of their dealers to even know it was there. And then we get prepared for March
1949.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Texarkana Baby was the first by Eddie Arnold.
Eddie Arnold, yeah.
Eddie Arnold.
Yeah.
And then within 5 years, history says over 200 million 45s are sold within a 5-year span right after that. And everybody jumps on board to the 45.
The 45, right.
Now, technologically, far more advanced than its predecessors for several reasons. Why?
Well, first off, RCA Victor developed this thing called the quality zone. By this time, recording with vinyl had become a pretty exact science, and they knew that on any particular show, any particular music, there was going to be a time when it was not the perfect sound they wanted, and so they developed a way to get what they called the quality zone. 72s didn't have it. If you ever listen to some 72s, you can understand this thing was perfect start to finish. The quality was unbelievable. Now that wasn't enough, because since we got this, we had to have a changer.
Right.
And the changer was part and parcel of the first release. And in March of that year, they released, not only were they going to the 45, they covered their bases though. They said, by the way, it will still play the 72. You would just change the speed. But this is the one that did it. And the engineers developed a very simple changer that dropped it in 1.5 seconds with 5 grams of force. So it was almost very gently and quiet. And the rest is history. You talked about the first. There was a sometime 2 years after, I think his name was Folsom, who was president at that time of RCA Victor. He was the prime mover behind this, and the marketing was incredible. March became the day. They celebrated the anniversary of it almost every year. The dealers, I mean, they had been prepped for this, and the thing about it was, it was double technology. It was a way for artists to make records on something entirely new, and it was a package. These sold, by the way, they were color coded. This is black. This was popular. I don't know if you have a red one here, but that was classical. Green was country and western. Blues was, I believe, blue. The actual vinyl.
Right.
Really blew my mind today when I was looking up some of this. Right outside my hometown of Jackson, Tennessee, there's one of these Tennessee markers for for somebody famous to live there, and it was
Sure.
Sonny Boy Williamson, who was one of the first blues. Sonny Boy Williamson's record came out right after the record you told me who was the first one.
Okay.
And it was a blues record. It covered all the genres, plus they kept the 72, saved their business. But about a year later, there was a rumor that this had all been, this is bust. And Folsom came on and says, we sold almost 200,000 records, and we're committed to this.
As a new medium.
That's a new medium. Walter Winchell, who at that time was the Walter Cronkite of the radio, and he came on and he just absolutely lambasted whoever started. This is a seasoned reporter that was spending time to talk about this.
Right, which was
Unheard
of.
Absolutely unheard of. And of course, the rest is history. Now, the popular side,
The A side.
the A side of the black. By the way, this sold for 69 cents. Classical was 85. You could get Shostakovich for 85 cents. I mean, where else could you do that? Remember what we talked about earlier. Up until now, this had been the venue of the wealthy. You had 72s. You had the 33 just kind of slipped in there, but you had the 72s, and that's what most people listened to, which was on.
And how expensive were the 72s? We're talking it was a little more money to shell out for that.
Oh yes, probably in the $2 or $3 a album. They coined the term album long before albums were ever made.
And students, in the early 1900s, $3 was like probably what, $30 today?
$30 now, right? So it was very expensive. So actually, dealers would cut the price of this. I bought 45s for 40 cents from.
Well, Tower Records got their start because they would buy used records and then sell them at the pharmacy.
Yeah, exactly.
At Tower Pharmacy for like a nickel or something,
Yeah.
and that's how they ended up starting their empire.
Well, the beauty of it is, since they developed this quality zone here, the things were indestructible and they would last forever. One other component of this, by the way, that the 72 industry did not have, and it really didn't need, because it was a richer market in terms of the economics, the socioeconomics, was it had a permanent stylus. It would be there. Well, you've got one. I mean,
I do, and it's still working.
It's still working. So, and it's who knows how old it is. So,
Right.
So you had a great medium that would cover all the genres of music. Everybody participated. Now, we're just talking about the mechanics. We're not talking about what went on in the record producers.
Right.
But Billboard was already a magazine when this came out. And so there were already weekly listings of who is playing what. Disc jockeys got a break on this one. There was a marketing directed entirely at him, and sometimes they got reimbursed for playing it. So it didn't take 4 or 5 years to run up a market out there. It was immediate. Now remember what time it was. It's right after the end of World War II.
Right, and post-war, and that's when the golden age is really considered for rock and roll and music in general.
Right.
But also, television really is not. It's not the medium that students understand today or think about today. Music, according to the history books, was the dominant entertainment.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely.
And that's how students met and talked about. That's what they met and talked about, and hung out on Friday nights and was listen to music.
Yeah.
So consider this the movie ticket into Malco at the time. Like,
Absolutely.
You would buy a bunch of 45s and go hang out.
Yeah.
With your friends.
You could go down on Bellevue and go to Leonard's Barbecue, which at that time was probably the most predominant barbecue. And at every table, there was an automatic where you didn't. The jukebox wasn't there, but the buttons were, and it played the music throughout. And people would sit there for hours, just doing nothing but listening to music.
Because we didn't have a cell phone to listen to the music on.
That's right.
You had to either own the music or go somewhere where you could listen to the music.
Absolutely. So it did. There's no question that it revolutionized. there's some question about when you look at this historically. It was almost as if RCA had a medium on their board who could predict this, because they were playing Dorsey and Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and these people who used to buy in 72s were now buying this, and the machine was there. And then you had this young culture coming up, which was going to be introduced to rock and roll just about the same exact moment that you had a medium to play it. It was portable. In fact, in the advertisement, RCA says you can stack 180 of these on the typical bookshelf along with your paperback books. That was your world right there. 180 of these. And they even got it down to how many minutes of music would be there. And so gradually these things migrated to teenagers' bedrooms. Remember, something else is changing. All those men that came back from World War II, and by the way, a lot of them took the GI Bill and went to college.
And they have money.
They have money. So this is moving up. We're building houses. We're building 3-bedroom brick houses as fast as we can go. And every kid had his own bedroom. And in that bedroom was this. It was portable. You could pick it up, take it to your friend's house for a sleepover. The music stayed in the bedroom.
Right.
Where in the past, you got together in the living room or the den or wherever it was, and you listened to Mom and Dad's 72s.
Or their massive radio unit,
right,
which was a piece of furniture.
Exactly right. And sometimes they were combined. RCA made a dual version of those. And you listen to that. It was their music.
And the generations before, the only thing they had understood, correct me if I'm wrong, you would turn on the radio and listen to a radio program, but it wasn't on demand. And it's the same reason we like to pick our phones up and download something today. We want something specific. We want to hear a specific album or a specific song now.
Right.
You didn't have the money to buy the 72s before. You now have the money to do this, so you can build your own collection. And no one had been doing that yet.
Absolutely.
Now, it defined... historians claim that this basically changed rock and roll or defined rock and roll. And I'm assuming in several ways, but one is how long would each side be, because that dictated the length of the song. And for many, many years, most songs were 3 minutes or less.
Yeah. Well, I think in some cases you could put up to 10 minutes on either side. And then, like you said earlier, then you had this fantastic A and B side. And often in the rock and roll genre, it was a total surprise. The Beatles' first, I Want to Hold Your Hand, was a popular song, but the B-side of that was even better. I Love You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. And it was almost unexplainable how that happened. Every artist. So it instead of spending long hours in a studio producing an album, giving it a catchy name, there it is. And you can go, next week you can do another one. And next week you can do another one.
Right, and that helped the budgets as well. Because you're budgeting, what, $50,000 in some cases in these to go into Abbey Road Studios for a month to do an album, or one day.
One day. Willie Nelson's compadre, Chips Moman, who ran a studio down on Madison. That's really basically how he got his. It was just a production thing. I mean, they had artists that would come and be the backup bands, and there they are. And they just turned them out as fat left and right. And Billboard picked up on the idea, this is new every week. Sometimes it's new every day. Top chart, #1 for 3 days. And then it would be unseated by somebody else.
Right.
And teenagers bought into that. I mean, for the first time, it was like The Voice. They could change the way Billboard rated the record because they would just go out and buy it.
Right.
I mean, for less than 50 cents, and sometimes much cheaper than that. You know, RCA, like everybody else, started off pricey a little bit. And by the way, when the 95 cent classical music just has got a defined market. I mean, it's going to expand a little bit here, but no one becomes a music fanatic overnight. I mean,
Correct.
It's either passed down through your family. That's all you could listen to.
It's an acquired taste.
It's an acquired taste. So even that they had to cut the price on. So it changed music in general in the United States, which at that time led the world. Now this caught on, and obviously the first place is in England, and it spread to Germany. If you go down to the Blues Museum in Clarksdale, and there's you sign in there, and if you look at the people from all over the world, they come from Germany and England and Scandinavia, and that's exactly where this phenomenon was transported overseas, in just about that order. And there's artists, they come to see artists that most people wouldn't even know who they are, and they come to see the birthplace of where they came from. So it was just explosive.
Now, its longevity is astounding to me, because this remained the dominant form until the mid-1980s with the CD. And
Back before that, the 8-track. Okay.
well, according to the public, the buying public,
Yeah.
the 8-track and the cassette tape, the record, according to Tower Records, this was still the highest seller.
Absolutely.
Until the CD.
Absolutely. Place
So
over, place over on Poplar called Pop Tunes. It stayed in business and was an active place, constant foot traffic in until the CD. It weathered the 8-track, which everybody thought was kind of humorous because you had to have this monstrous box to play it.
Right.
And it was designed for an automobile. It was not designed for in-home use. It had to have you had to have a new deal, a converter. You could plug it in. It was made for a 12-volt car battery.
And didn't sound as good.
No,
I don't think it sounded
no.
good.
In fact, a lot of people tell you that even modern CDs don't sound as good as these.
Oh, Jerry Wexler was the first one to say that. And for those of you who don't know who he was, president of Atlantic Records, probably one of the biggest record tycoons in the world in history. He said that there was something about the wax, the vinyl record itself, that just adhered to your ear and just was perfect.
It is. And once again, RCA, it's post-war time. You got a lot of people going to college. You got career fields that we've never heard of. Audio recording, the medium that you use, the physics of it, everything that was needed to design something that would play it, that was inexpensive, used one vacuum tube.
Right. Now, let's also talk about the term stack 'em high.
Yeah.
This comes from the 45, and basically teenagers would take a whole bunch of these on a machine, and we have a little video that we're showing you right now, and they would stack these records up, and you could build your own playlist, which was a huge
absolutely
deal.
Yeah.
So you could build a playlist. The first playlist in history was built from these machines.
Right.
You would stack the records up, and like you said earlier, it would play it and then very gently drop the record down. The needle would swing back over, and that was some kind of technology.
Oh yeah, 1.5 seconds. The needle carrier would move out of the way, come back, 1.5 seconds, it would drop it. Even better, it was the 5 grams of force that it fell like a feather.
Right.
And there wasn't any harsh sound. And
because these record machines, you would hear vibrations and pops and stuff on the machine itself. So it had to set it down gently. It couldn't make a big boom every time.
And when they finally hooked up little earphones to them, it also kept mom and dad from knowing that you were listening to music way into the nighttime, because you didn't hear that clack, clack, clack. It was
right. And we get several terms that we still use today from the 45, which still astounds me. The term single
Yep, that's
comes from a 45, and we still use that term today when an artist doesn't release an album, but they just release a single. The term EP comes from 45s, and that was an extended play, which was basically 2 45s, and it was like a mini album.
Yeah.
And that comes from the 45s as well, the EP. And then, of course, with the 45, I believe the start of the artwork and the beautiful stuff that they would start to do with albums, soon to be after the 45, really started with some of the 45s, and people would get very excited about going and buying 45s that had
because they could see
good looking artwork,
Yeah.
which apparently you had to pay just a slightly more money for some
remember
of those.
now, not everybody got to see the Beach Boys. They heard the Beach Boys, but not everybody knew what they looked like. And so now there was a visual tag to who you were listening to. Little Deuce Coupe now had a face on it.
Right.
Yeah, you could see it. It was incredible. It really was.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts is, it's exciting to have lived through that and watched it happen and really not know. I played in a rock and roll band in college. In fact, it's part and parcel of the way I put myself through college. And you were in it's like I tell my history students, history's a river, and you're in it. There's not really a choice where you're going to go. What may not occur to you is that it's flowing and what's happening at the time it's flowing. And this was one of we just took it for granted. I mean, 45s.
Vinyl is coming back. Some say that, in fact, you can go to Garner Records in Midtown today, and they have a section of 45s. They have some older 45s you can buy, but they also have a section of new and upcoming artists, indie artists mostly, independent artists.
What's cheaper to do?
And they have a section of 45s, which is so cool. And you go in there and you see a lot of younger people gravitating and buying 45s. I typically buy albums. I still buy full vinyl albums. In fact, I played one for my students today at school, and they think that's like the younger generation really thinks that's something because we've not seen that.
Yeah,
we didn't grow up with that type of technology. Right. And I'll be honest, when I was growing up, very few records were played. My parents would play some jazz and some folk. We mostly had folk albums like James Taylor and Carole King and that stuff. But by the time I was getting bigger, CDs had sort of taken over the market, and that was what my collection was hundreds and hundreds of CDs. I agree with you. These sound better.
Yeah, can you see how you can stack 188?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.